Comfortably Zoned Radio Network presents Remembering Dynasty with Peter Golenbock.
We're back. Peter Golenbock, Remembering Dynasty. Peter, we remember a lot more. Thank you for your cooperation in all of this. We had technical problems last week, and they seem to be solved, which is a blessing. Welcome from St. Petersburg. I'm in Alameda, California, and we've been doing this a while, and I'm so happy that you're a part of it.
Thank you so much.
Yeah. We always looking for things to talk about. I suggested that we talk about a book that you wrote back in 2008 that you said you particularly liked writing, and it's in the country of Brooklyn, and I have so much to ask. I'll just start by saying that in the preface of the book, you mentioned that 1 out of 7 people in the United States has roots in Brooklyn. What are your roots in Brooklyn?
I have no roots in Brooklyn.
Okay.
I have no roots at all. Here, my only roots is this. My uncle was Jackie Robinson's lawyer. So that's my roots. So in 1956, my uncle said to me, "How would you like to come with me to the World Series?" And I said, "Fine, that sounds great." So we went to Game 4 of the 1956 World Series. Game 5, of course, was the one where Don Larson pitched his perfect game, but this was Game 4.
Right.
And after the game, my uncle said to me, "I've got to go and talk to Jackie for a few minutes." Jackie was moving to Stamford, Connecticut, which in fact was where I grew up. And they had to talk about some sort of business. And so this is the one time I met Jackie Robinson. I was 10. He was about 9 feet tall. We shook hands. He had the biggest hands. He was a huge, presence in my mind ever since then.
Right.
And I wrote, as a result of that, I wrote a book called Bums, which was an oral history of the Brooklyn Dodgers. Jackie had died. I wrote that book, early 1980s, and Jackie had died, I believe, in 1972. He was 53 years old. He looked like he was about 75.
Right. He died of diabetes.
But Rachel Robinson, by dint of the fact that my uncle was their lawyer, gave me tremendous access, and it must have interviewed her for probably 4 hours when I wrote Bums. And as far as I was concerned, the book was as much about how Jackie not only broke the color line in baseball, but really he broke the color line in the country, because there was no more important person in the civil rights movement than Jackie Robinson. I mean,
Martin Luther King said, "Without Jackie, there would have been no civil rights movement as we know it."
That's absolutely true. That's absolutely true. This is the year 2016, and so people do not remember that back in 1947, when Jackie joined the Dodgers, everything was segregated. Jim Crow was the law of the land, and I mean the whole land, not just the South.
Right. North, it was overt. It was covert rather than overt, but it certainly was.
Right. And no two ways about it. I mean, the great black athletes who came before Jackie, Jack Johnson in the early 1900s, he was there, and they managed to figure out some way to throw him in jail by accusing him of taking white women across state borders for immoral purposes. And so back then, any time an African American was escorting a white woman, by definition, that was for immoral purposes. And then you had Joe Louis, of course, who was a fabulous champion, but Joe Louis could not stay in any of the white hotels in New York. You also had in the 1936 Olympics, you had Jesse Owens, who was such a fabulous figure. And when he came back from the Olympics, he too found that he was, treated no better than any other African American in the country. And so Jackie Robinson comes up. He plays in Montreal in 1946, comes up to the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947, and it's shocking. I mean, it is absolutely shocking, because all along the reason why the whites would not allow blacks to play the sports, they would say that they're not good enough, they don't have the necessary, brains to play.
Right.
They're better off playing in the Negro leagues. They should stay to themselves. They can't compete with us, that sort of thing. And it turns out, Jackie Robinson, in his very first year, he was the Rookie of the Year. He helped lead the Dodgers to the pennant in 1947. In 1950, he was the most valuable player in the whole league. He showed America that he was not only as good, but he was a hell of a lot better than a lot of those white baseball players.
Absolutely. And a lot of people don't...
Not only that, he showed the whole world. He showed America that, the notion that blacks, we're not going to give them the opportunity because they can't, they just can't compete against us, which I have a sneaky suspicion everybody knew that wasn't true to begin with, but that was just a fiction to keep them from competing.
Oh, they knew it.
So
when
came up
when Page barnstormed against Feller, all the white guys against the black guys, and
yep.
They played them to evenly. I mean, you can't say one was
right. Let me say this, that after writing Bums, which was a tremendous experience, I had the opportunity to interview, all, Pee Wee Reese and Duke Snider and, Roy Campanella and everybody who played for the Dodgers. Jackie, of course, had died, but the opportunity to interview Rachel Robinson was just tremendous. And so it wasn't, too many more years after that I thought to myself, what was amazing about Jackie playing in Brooklyn was that he was hated everywhere else in the country, but in Brooklyn he was beloved. So the question was, why? Why was that? And I have a close friend. I have a close friend, Joe Doranson, who is a professor of history, and he specializes in civil rights at Long Island University in Brooklyn. And I had this conversation with him, one day, and he said, here's a list of people you can talk to, some of whom will give you the answer as to why Jackie was so popular in Brooklyn when he was hated everywhere else in the country. And that's how I started.
And that they made up that list made up the bulk of the people you interviewed.
Well, about half of them. About half of them. That list.
Okay. Why Monte Irvin? Why Monte Irvin? What was his relation? Because
why Monte Irvin? All right, Monte Irvin lived in Ocala. I live in St. Petersburg, and one day Monte was invited to a symposium at University of South Florida here in St. Pete. And for the joy of it, I went to pick him up. And on the ride from his home to the college, which was about an hour and 15 minutes, I said to him, would you mind if I interviewed you? And he said, no, absolutely not. And as we talked, he told me something that he had really never told anybody else, because he's such a modest person. He told me, Branch Rickey asked me to be the first African-American player before he asked Jackie. And I was just stunned.
Yeah.
Stunned. Because I had never, ever heard this before. Not at all. And so I said to him, well, why didn't you do this? And he proceeded to tell me that during the war, he had been in a black unit. The Army was not integrated until a bunch of years after the war. 1949 or 50, I think. And again, the Army was integrated in large part because of what Jackie did with the Dodgers. I do firmly believe. But Monte was in this black unit, and he said that they weren't allowed to do very much more than build roads and dig ditches. That the soldiers at the PX, the black soldiers, were given very little room in the PX. The white soldiers had all the amenities, and they had nothing. And that the officers were mostly Southern crackers who made their life miserable. And so when Rickey asked him, he told Rickey that his nerves were so jangled and frayed from being in the Army with those white officers that there was no way in the world, emotionally, he could possibly do a thing like that. And so he said, no, you're going to have to get somebody else. And obviously, the person that they chose was Jackie Robinson.
Right.
And it took Monte a couple more years. He played with the Newark Eagles for a couple more years in the Negro Leagues before finally he was signed by the New York Giants, and he helped lead the New York Giants to pennants in both 1951 and 1954.
Absolutely.
So
he was so
Go ahead.
No, I was saying he was so far beyond his prime by that time. Really
absolutely. No question about it, as was Jackie. Jackie was 28 years old when he started playing.
Well, when he started, right.
So you asked me why Monte Irvin was in this book. Monte Irvin was in this book because I wanted to write about what happened to him in the Army and the fact that he had actually been picked prior, to his picking Jackie Robinson for that role. I thought people would find that very, very interesting.
Yeah, I've been thinking about that question for 2 weeks what to ask you.
Yeah.
Because there were no Brooklyn Dodgers interviewed. But the book is beyond the Dodgers, like you say.
Oh no, the book is way, way, way beyond the other person who I interviewed, which was just stupendously fabulous, was a fellow by the name of Lester Rodney, who your listeners probably never heard of, even though he was in California.
No.
Lester Rodney, in the 1930s, he was the sports editor for the Daily Worker, which was the communist newspaper. And he had no particular political, notions about, overthrowing the government or anything like that. In fact, most of the people who had joined the Communist Party in the 1930s did so because they were civil rights activists. The Republicans had no interest in desegregating the country. The Democrats had even less interest in desegregating the country. The only people who had any thought of fairness towards African Americans in the 1930s and 40s were members of the Communist Party. And that's why they were members. They wanted to give African Americans a fair shot. And so one of the things that Lester Rodney did, which was so fascinating to me, and he told me his and basically his entire life story and many of the things that he did in the paper, was he would say, corner Leo DeRocher and say to DeRocher, are any of the players in the Negro Leagues good enough to play in the major leagues? And he would say, absolutely. Probably 15 of them would be stars in our league as well. And so Rodney would say to DeRocher, do you mind, may I put that in the newspaper? And DeRocher would let him. And then Kennesaw Mountain Landis would call DeRocher in and tell him you better keep his mouth shut. Because a lot of the managers were scared to death of Kennesaw Mountain Landis, and they didn't want to, who was a terrible, terrible racist, who was almost single-handedly responsible for keeping African Americans out of baseball during the time he was the commissioner. Fortunately, that's a funny word, but he died in 1944. Which allowed Major League Baseball to bring in Albert Happy Chandler as the new commissioner. And in Bums, I had the pleasure of interviewing Happy Chandler.
Wow.
Not terribly long before he died. And Chandler told me specifically that the Major League owners had voted 15-1 not to let Jackie Robinson play. The Yankees didn't want him because they didn't want black fans somehow forcing the white fans away from the Yankee Stadium. The Giants didn't want them because the Polo Grounds was in Harlem, and they were afraid that somehow there would be a riot, of course, which never occurred, as you know. So the vote was 15-1. So Rickey called Happy Chandler and said, look, I intend to, in 1947, to bring Jackie Robinson up to the major leagues. Are you with me? And at that point, people don't realize it, but if Happy Chandler had said no, that would have been it. He would not have been allowed to bring him up.
Yeah.
And Happy Chandler had been governor of Kentucky, a southern state. He had been senator from Kentucky a couple of times. And Happy Chandler said to Ranch Rickey, I'm with you. You bring him up, and let's see what happens.
What do you suppose, how did that happen in terms of Happy Chandler, his upbringing?
Happy Chandler said to Rickey, when I die, and if I'm going to heaven, I don't want, whoever it is up there saying to me, you're the guy who kept these people from being allowed to play. It was a religious thing, oddly enough.
That's the best example of Christianity I've ever,
exactly.
Christianity with a small c.
Yeah,
you're Christian.
Without a doubt. Yeah, no, that's right. That's exactly right, yeah.
That's wonderful.
And
I didn't know that. That's a wonderful story.
And actually, I went to his home, and he was so appreciative because nobody had ever written that, ever. Chandler had never been given any credit, and this was in Bums.
Right.
And he made me an honorary Kentucky colonel, which was really sweet. I have the plaque somewhere sitting in my house.
Nice.
Yeah, but the histories behind these things are very, very complicated. Perhaps if Lester Rodney hadn't been writing about the importance of integrating baseball for 10, 15 years, maybe it wouldn't have happened. If Happy Chandler hadn't let Rickey do it, it certainly wouldn't have happened.
I think Rickey did it to enrich the ball club. he did, more than anything.
No, Rickey did it for a lot of reasons. Rickey's a very complicated guy. Rickey, unfortunately, had one flaw, and that was he enriched himself tremendously in the game of baseball to the extent that he lived in a mansion. And at the same time, during his whole career as owner, general manager, he did everything he could to keep the players as poor as they possibly could. That was his flaw. Jackie Robinson made $5,000 his first year as a Brooklyn Dodger, and Rickey got that money back the first game.
Wow.
But it was more altruistic than just money. Rickey had been a coach at a school in Michigan, and on that team of his was a catcher by the name of Thomas. And they went to Notre Dame one day, and the fella at the desk said to Rickey, that fella, meaning Thomas, is not allowed to stay in our hotel. And that was because he was black. And Rickey said to him, can he stay in my room if it's okay with me? And the guy said, well, all right, you want to do that? Sure, he can stay with you. And he sent Thomas up ahead while he gave out the keys to all the rest of the players in the other rooms. Well, when Rickey went upstairs to his room, there was Thomas literally trying to rip off his skin of his hands. He was crying just something terribly over, being treated that way. And Rickey never forgot it. And Rickey vowed that if he ever had the opportunity to make it up to Thomas and to the other African Americans in the country, he would. And as you know, he did.
That was years later. I mean, probably
years later.
30
yes,
years.
Yes.
Yeah.
30 years later. Oh, yeah, 35 years later. Right.
Yeah.
Exactly right. Well, Rickey, people don't realize what Rickey was the most important baseball executive in the history of the game of baseball.
Absolutely.
There's no question
once.
about that. Rickey started as a catcher with the St. Louis Browns, and they made him the manager.
Signed
and he was
George
quite
Sisler.
frankly signed George Sisler, but he was not a very good manager because he was too intellectual, and he drove his players crazy with his his fastidiousness.
He used
and
to
so,
set
so
up
he,
these things in spring training, these training devices.
The Dodgers used it even after he died. No question about it. His training methods were wonderful.
Yeah.
But more than that, he left the Browns, and then he went to the St. Louis Cardinals. The stupidest thing the Browns owner could have possibly done was to let him go. So he went across town from the Browns to the St. Louis Cardinals, where he decided that the system that they had, which was that any time you wanted a player, you paid huge amount of monies to them as a bonus to get them to sign with you. He thought, this is a really stupid system. So what he did instead was he set up something that we now know as the farm system. So he started with 2 or 3 different, towns at various levels. The notion being, if you sign a hell of a lot of players, a bunch of them are going to end up being stars. And he started doing this. He had to fight Kennesaw Mountain Landis the whole way. He even took him to court, and he ended up winning. And at the height, the St. Louis Cardinals had about 20 different farm teams. It was astounding. Wow. And those farm teams led to pennants. If I remember correctly, 1942, 1943. There were others too. They won in 34. I'm sure there were a couple
Pepper Martin years.
Pepper Martin years, right?
Yes.
Also Stan Musial, Marty Marion. Those guys.
Right.
Won a whole bunch of pennants. And then what happened, of course, is that always Branch would be over. He would have a certain limit. He would outstay his welcome, and he ended up going from the St. Louis Cardinals now to the Brooklyn Dodgers after Ebbets died. The relatives sold the team off to 3 different people who were owning the team in equal partnerships. There was a fellow by the name of Smith, and then of course there was Walter O'Malley. Walter O'Malley had made his money working for a bank, throwing people out of their homes for foreclosures, and of course Branch Rickey.
A visionary.
Oh yes, without a doubt. At any rate, but Branch Rickey was one of the 3 people who actually knew how to run a ball club, and so Rickey took the reins. And obviously, Rickey did the same thing. He set up a farm system for the Brooklyn Dodgers. That was tremendous. The Montreal team was playing. That was their AAA team. And what, of course, was brilliant about that, of course, is that Jackie Robinson could play an entire season playing for Montreal, which was in Canada, which had no racism to it whatsoever. And so he was totally beloved in Montreal when he played that year. He had no trouble finding housing. He had no trouble going into a restaurant to eat. He was, treated like any other human being was, and he had a wonderful year, and he thrived, he flourished, he did wonderfully well, which then enabled to him after that great success to come up to the Brooklyn Dodgers in 1947.
Right. I always thought that players that came after him, like Frank Robinson and Vada Pinson and Willie too, they had to come up in, not so much Willie, he played mostly in the North, but a lot of guys played in the South.
There was no North. They all went through hell, every one of them. Larry Doby, Willie Mays. The thing that Willie had Leo DeRocher as his manager. Right. And Leo was tremendously protective of his boy. And that was a great
and Monte was
for,
there
for
too.
Willie.
Monte was there too.
And Monte was there too, sure. But every one of them went through that hazing where they were called nigger and had things thrown at them, and the opposing pitchers would throw at their heads, and if they were in the infield, the runners would come and try to spike them and hurt them, that sort of thing. It was a terrible time for being a pioneer.
And it wasn't just the players. It was, I can remember hearing about this, and I don't remember if I ever read the little ditty that they wrote with the N-word that reporters wrote when there were three blacks in 1951. Mueller was hurt sliding into third base in the playoffs. Hank Thompson went to right field, and they had three blacks playing in the World Series. First time three blacks
Hank
had
Thompson,
ever been in.
Willie May and Monte Irvin, right, exactly
and Monte Irvin. And New York writers, I don't know which one specifically, but I know I saw it in print, saw the article or a copy, wrote some sort of ditty about, I won't use the word, and New York has three N-words. They used that in 1950. We're the same age. This is our lifetime. This is disgraceful.
Well, I'm telling you, people do not today realize the racism that was going on in the 40s. It was complete. It was total. And the one person who broke that up was Robinson,
who had served in the armed forces. Monte had served in the armed forces. I can't believe that this country could put aside veterans, not come together to fight Nazis. I mean, it's incredible. It's just
let me just say to you right now on the streets of the cities of this country, 50,000 homeless veterans today. Yeah. Okay.
No,
and this is how many years later? All right.
So. We are young people are being used as fodder for wars that bring nothing but oil, and if it doesn't bring oil, it stops other countries from getting oil. So all they're using bombs to play the world market. It's absolutely no concern for humanity, no concern for the returning veterans. It's a disgraceful world, and it's unless we have Bernie coming in, I'll get off that subject, there's going to be no change. Hillary is. Well,
if there's no change, I've been so pleased with Barack Obama as our president. If Hillary comes in and does the exact same thing, I'll be thrilled, absolutely thrilled, because she'll have an opportunity to pick the Supreme Court justices, and she'll have an opportunity to keep the Senate and the House Tea Party claque, from doing any more damage.
Yeah. Well, my thing is that politicians who are indebted when they come into office to big business cannot represent us, and she is just that. As are most 100% of Republicans, most Democrats are absent. Take firm. Bernie's the only one that doesn't. There's a big rift between Bernie and Hillary. Not as big a rift.
But Bernie.
Between.
The problem is Bernie will not be able to lead. He just won't. She's connected. She's connected to everybody, and she's a compromiser. You got to have compromise these days. If you don't have compromise, even with these Tea Party guys, you're going to get nowhere. You may get nowhere anyway. I mean, I don't care who it is. If it's Bernie or Hillary, who I love Hillary. We went to see Chelsea Clinton 2 nights ago, and she was just charming and wonderful. These are terrific people. Bill Clinton is a terrific person, and Hillary's a terrific person. Say whatever you want about her politics. These are very fine people. I'm perfectly happy with either of them.
I would be happy if a Democrat. I will have to say.
Yeah. Well, I mean, you're going to be in
happy
big
with
trouble.
Bernie, but it's got to be.
You'll be in big trouble if Donald T. Trump is your president. You're going to be.
I don't think. I think when it comes down to it, at the very, very end, Romney will come in and say, or they'll bring Romney in and say, "We can't run Trump. This is nuts."
Probably,
he doesn't represent us.
Yeah, what's the fellow who's now the head of the Senate? Paul?
McClellan.
No, the head of the Senate.
I'm blanking.
I was going to say Gabe Paul, but it's not.
Yeah, right. I was going to ask if he played second base at one time.
Yes, he did. Anyhow, take the subject off of politics right now, and you can go.
Let's get back to Brooklyn a little bit. How did Neil Sedaka come into it? He played at my prom that I took Elaine Crone to when I was 17.
Elaine
Jack
Crone.
Something's International Club. He was just coming. He was a star at that time in 1964. And how did you? I know, obviously, a Brooklyn guy. How did that come about?
Well, part of what I wanted to show was that Brooklyn was very important when it came to music. And I found somebody who could give me the telephone number of Neil Sedaka's manager, and I called him up and told him what I was doing. And Neil called me back, and we had a marvelous, marvelous conversation. I mean, I love the guy's music. He's such an interesting guy. He told me the story of his life and what it was like growing up in Brooklyn and so forth and so on. He sang me a couple of songs, which was just, too fabulous. And I wanted, just people to see that there are, there are writers. Pete Hamill. I interviewed Pete Hamill, who was absolutely sensational in this book. I interviewed people. I interviewed a fellow by the name of Charlie Barron, who had been a Black Panther, who became a politician. A guy by the name of Avis Moroden, who had fought against the fascists in Spain. Brooklyn Borough President Marty Markowitz is in here. Sedaka. I found a police officer, a guy by the name of John Mackey.
Right.
We talked about the rioting that had happened in Brooklyn, the race rioting that happened in Brooklyn. One of my favorite chapters, I interviewed a fellow by the name of Ira Glasser, who for many years was the president of the ACLU. And Ira,
as an attorney, that had to be thrilling, really.
Well, I don't see myself as an attorney, so it was thrilling just because it was Ira. At any rate, he was. He was a young boy when Jackie came up, and he proceeded to tell me that before Jackie, the only African American person he knew was the doorman of his apartment, and this was the first notion that he had of seeing African Americans doing something wonderful. Here was Jackie Robinson, the hero of his baseball team, the Brooklyn Dodgers. And he said that he and so many other young, and I have to say Jewish boys, because Brooklyn was probably made up of 75% Jews, as well as Italians and Irish. And when Jackie came up, some blacks and Puerto Ricans, but not all that many then. That Ira said that there's this whole legion of young boys growing up idolizing Jackie Robinson, who then went out and worked in the civil rights movement. And, of course, he became the president, the head. He became the head of the ACLU, which fought for civil rights for years. With the inspiration of Jackie. So that just changed the entire spirit of the country. Exactly. Yeah, without a doubt. And it spread all over the country. As you said at the beginning, 1 out of 6 or 7 people at some point lived in Brooklyn. Can you tell me something, Rachel? Can you tell me something, Rachel, now that I'm thinking about it, told you, or some interaction you had with, please? Oh, sure. And this was in Bums. Rachel and Jackie flew from, they lived in Pasadena, so which airport would they have taken? San Francisco. And then flew to Texas. They flew down to Texas And the next thing they were supposed to do is fly to, let's see, where were they supposed to? No, I think they flew to New Orleans, or at any rate, they flew to Texas. They flew to Texas, and they bumped them off the plane because the rule was that if white people wanted the seat, the black people had to get off. And they experienced this, and they had never experienced anything like this before. And I think they got from Texas then to New Orleans in Louisiana, and they bumped them off again, and they told them, you know, there's a chance that you'll never get on another plane, you know, one of those things. And so they got on the bus. And she's sitting there with a fur coat, and, you know, these people are sitting in the back with chickens, you know, and they're riding to Daytona for spring training.
Right.
So anyhow, they ended up getting as far as Jacksonville. And this is their first experience, you know, in the Deep South. And it was not only shocking, but it was horrifying. You know, when you're not used to being treated like that. Jackie, like I said, was 28 years old. I mean, he had taken a lot of grief when he was in the Army. He had been even court-martialed because they had passed a rule in the Army that on the Army bases you didn't have to go to the back of the bus. But the bus drivers who were racist, they didn't like the new rule. And so they had Jackie court-martialed, which, you know, they didn't end up doing it. But Rachel was not used to being treated like that. And it was just terrible. And she felt terrible for Jackie because there's nothing you can do. You can't fight back.
Right.
Not only that, but Jackie had told Rickey, of course, that he would not fight back.
He's turned his cheek for 2 years. Yeah.
Well, that's right. So to listen to her tell me the story of how they tried to get from California to spring training in the first place, it's like, holy smokes.
And this is their first year, right?
Yeah.
Incredible.
Yeah. It was really something. I just love that woman. She's so fabulous.
He internalized a lot, and
but the wonderful thing is that she, you know, there was nothing in it for her. I mean, she theoretically could have very well written her own book based on all the information that she had given me. And,
right.
And she was open and honest and wonderful, and she really, it was her, you know, yes, I interviewed, you know, Snyder and Furlow and Erskine and Campanella and Pee Wee and all of those guys, but really the star of the book was Rachel Robinson. It really was.
Yeah, it was a great book. Dynasty was a great book. Forever, what was
the Forever Boy?
Florida,
yes.
The Florida
Forever
League.
Boy.
I love that book too. We're going to talk about that. I'm going to have Lenny Randall on. He's been on my show.
Good. Lenny and I have been talking. Yeah, Lenny's good.
Oh,
good
beautiful.
Guy.
Then let's arrange that down the line. And
sure.
Can I just ask you what?
Ask me anything you want.
Something about the spirit of Brooklyn I want to know about from your standpoint. Can't ask the question. I don't know how to word the question.
The spirit of Brooklyn, I think, more than anything else, had to do with the fact that when Jackie came up in 1947, that Brooklyn was probably 75% Jewish. And as you know, of course, the Jews had been slaughtered in the Holocaust, and that anti-Semitism was almost as bad as racism was in the country. And so for all of those Jews to see Jackie Robinson succeed like that told all of them that they could succeed in this country just as well. And, you know,
very well
it was a very, very important moment for all of those people who lived in Brooklyn. Tremendous. And all those people, the doctors, and they became lawyers, and they went out.
Right.
You know, interestingly enough, what happened, they all became so successful is that in the middle 50s, they all left. They went to Long Island. They went to Connecticut. They went to New Jersey. They all wanted an acre of land with a house and 2 cars.
Mm-hmm.
And they left Brooklyn. They left Brooklyn to the extent that by the end of 1957, Walter O'Malley and Horace Stoneham took the Dodgers and took the New York Giants west. And he broke everybody's heart.
There was a tremendous conflict between O'Malley, Robert Moses,
Yeah.
And I think Robert Moses wanted to build a stadium in Queens, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, well, he did. That's where Shea Stadium ended up being. Exactly.
Right.
Yeah, it was stupid.
It
was just stupid. It was damn stupid, and Robert Moses was stupid. But he also was power hungry. And he was. You've got to read. If you ever want to read a biography, the greatest biography ever written by anybody ever in American history was written by Robert Caro, and the book is called The Power Broker, and it's about Robert Moses. It's a stunningly phenomenal book.
I will definitely get that book. Hey,
you might want to get in the country of Brooklyn as well, but
yes,
Power Broker.
As a matter of fact,
Broker.
that's on Amazon for $12.99. You could download it to your Kindle, ladies and gentlemen. And
yeah, you can.
You want to hear something cool? You got to hear this, Peter.
Sure.
I'm in a bookstore with Tally, my lover, and we're in Berkeley. We live in Alameda, and I'm browsing books, and The Spirit of St. Louis comes up, and
what's it doing? What's it doing in California?
I don't know, but I didn't even know of its existence. Living in California, the Internet is fine now, but it was real difficult for a long time on a lot of levels keeping up with stuff. You wrote I thumbed through that book. That is a wonderful history of St. Louis. We'll have to talk about that.
Okay.
You've had a great life, Peter.
I'm not complaining.
No,
Ralph, not at all.
Not at all. This is cool for me. So, before we go, I want to tell you my one story about the spirit of Brooklyn, and you might enjoy this. I had cousins who lived in Brooklyn. Father was a heart doctor at Brooklyn Jewish Hospital, Sam Nisnowitz.
Mm-hmm.
My cousins were at 100 Ocean Parkway in Brooklyn.
Mm-hmm.
30 years later, my mother retires to Florida and was sitting in the pool with 80 women and the two guys that survived, the two widowers. Right. And you notice how that works a lot. We leave people behind. And there's a man sitting there. My mother says, "This is a man who lived in your Uncle Sam Sedaka's house." Yep. He goes, "Yes, on 100 Ocean Parkway." She says, "Yes, I lived there with Sam. What did you do?" He says, "Well, I had a fruit stand." I said, "Okay." We talked and I brought up California mangoes, right? And he looked at me. He goes, "Mangoes? You can't talk mangoes like we had in Brooklyn at my stand."
Oh, that's
he had a pride. You get that? He had a pride like we had in Brooklyn.
Yeah,
it was something that he lit up when he thought of his business, his city, his environment. People took pride in that community. And
it's so interesting because we're talking about immigrants today, and they want to, make a wall and keep all the immigrants out. And I'm thinking to myself, what is wrong with you people? This entire strength of this country is on the
has been founded by immigrants. Absolutely, yeah.
It makes no sense. They came from Poland, they came from Germany, they came from Italy, they came from Ireland, and made this country great. And like that fella, I'm sure he came from Poland, escaping from the Nazis and settled in Brooklyn, and he started with a pushcart, and he ended up having a fruit stand. And look where he was. He's in Miami Beach, for crying out loud.
And he had pride. That's
tremendous. Tremendous.
That was it. And that is Brooklyn to me. And I love talking about it. I love this episode, Peter. Next week, same time, same place. We got the equipment to work, which is
we got the equipment to work. Yes, very good.
All
right,
good, and
all right. Have a great week.
You too. I'm going to end the show just by telling everybody to hang in there. Ups and downs of life. like a roller coaster, up and down. Be the same every day. People should know if you're up, you're down. Try to keep your attitude the same because that's the way it is. It'll get better tomorrow. Thank you, everybody out there. Thank you, Peter Golenbock. I can learn to pronounce your name right, for Christ's sake. And again, everybody, adios.